And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Warburg Infusion Entertainment Review. It's time for episode 58. I'm your host, Thomas, a.k.a. Mr. Warburg, joined, as always, by Patrick, a.k.a. Mr. Fusion.
Greetings and salutations, everybody.
Wait, no, he's on the... There. He's there. And, of course, that laugh is our returning guest, one of the few returning guests we've had, and that is Mr. Nick Schwartz.
Hi, thanks for having me back. I didn't know I was one of the few returning. That's cool.
Well, we also don't have that many guests. I'll be honest with you. But you're definitely one I wanted to have multiple times this year because, number one, The Last of Us. I think most of The Last of Us content I have consumed has actually been through your stream.
Bringing it back soon, by the way. The show has inspired me because I need to finish my playthrough on the remake of 1 on PS5. So
I'm actually hoping to buy that and do that because I played the first one on the I want to say the PS4 version. That remaster version?
Yes.
But this one's an actual opened up the, it wasn't just a repaint. It was them actually going in and tightening up mechanics, new facial animation, things like that. So
looks gorgeous.
And yeah, I was gonna say it looks fantastic, and then it's more in line with the technology of the second one. So it should be a more seamless transition for me because I haven't played the second one.
Oh.
So we got our intros out of the way. So our general rule, of course, we go through what we're watching and playing real quick before we jump into The Last of Us. Anything you've been watching or playing, Nick? We'll start with you.
I have been playing God of War Ragnarok. I beat it when it first came out, and I'm doing a completionist playthrough right now on God of War difficulty, which is the hardest setting. So I'm in post-game now, and I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I'm having a time with a certain set of bosses.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, those ancillary bosses, you could say. It's a big step up from the first one. Yeah, fun.
They were not messing around. Yeah, I was like, I think these might be harder than the Valkyries were in the first game.
Yeah, I had to turn on the accessibility, the checkpoint assist.
Oh, really?
Saved my butt. Because after, if the boss has phases, it will make a checkpoint if you die, and it'll start at the checkpoint you died on.
Oh.
You don't have to go through the whole thing again. And you come back with full health.
Oh, God. That would be a miracle.
It saved my butt. It's in the accessibility settings, which is a great feature that I wish more games would use.
Last of Us also did a lot of accessibility features akin to that, I think. So that's really cool.
Any other games or shows?
Other than that, I'm like 50 some odd hours into this playthrough. It's insane. And then anything else, any other time that I get, I'm just kind of like sitting on the couch with my wife as she watches Gilmore Girls. So I'm like kind of taking it all in. I don't know if you ever watched that show, but it's growing on me, man. I like it.
Horrible intro. Really, really bad.
It's very
intro
dated
song.
of its time.
Oh, yes. Yeah, but the song, I don't know. It's something about it. It feels like fall again,
Fusion, what about you?
Let's see here. Watched because we've talked about this. Wife bought me an Alamo Draft House Movie Pass that I've been really not abusing but taking advantage of. Caught Babylon. Interesting movie. Could have been really good. I think there were a lot of things missing, but I really enjoyed the fact that it tells kind of a really interesting spin on moving from silent film to talkies, that era, that transitional era. Watched a lot of documentaries. Someone, growing up and, went to school and worked in media for a long time. That was a big thing that I was so interested in, was the transition over, and a lot of these actors that were silent actors that had to struggle once people started hearing that they had horrible voices. Charlie Chaplin, kind of one of the bigger ones. When they realized this guy sounded like a tool, they were like, yeah, we don't really like him in talkies. It could have been a great film. Margot Robbie was brilliant in it. Brad Pitt was awesome in it, but there could have been so much more out of that film. Raunchy as hell, but I think there's a reason why it tells you that, hey, kind of your perception of Hollywood at that time was very different than what was going on in the background. But I think the story itself was lacking a little bit, and maybe the studio got involved. I don't know. Recently, the other day, caught, and Warburg knows this because he loves this movie too.
Really do.
Last Action Hero on Monday night. The Draft House has these weekly old school showings, and on Sunday I'm gonna go catch the Goonies, which I'm super excited for. Yes, man. And then Sunday
there's a 4K UHD of it. How did I not know this?
And I own it, man. I showed you the tin I bought. Yeah.
It's a steelbook, too.
Yep.
That's
yes,
crazy.
it is.
Damn. I bought the DVD when I was in high school. I have the Blu-ray now. Am I going to buy this movie a third time?
You got to do it, man.
Might have to.
Hey, you got to do it. You have like 20 different versions of Skyrim. Own every format of Goonies, man. Come on.
He's right. He's absolutely right.
Caught Last Action Hero. It's one of those underrated fun movies. I'm not going to say it's great. I'm going to say it's fun. And I will tell you, man, had that movie come out now, like kind of the whole commentary on just like meta awareness in Hollywood and just in film, I think it would have been a banger.
It absolutely would star Ryan Reynolds, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it would. But I'm talking about just the whole theme of it, the whole story. It would have been a banger. It would have been a banger, you know. I think especially if you had like A24 Studio doing it, you know, I'd be like, holy shit. Soundtrack still kicks ass. So
that was
they're doing that.
I want to say the last time AC/DC did a 4 something kind of track that was Big Gun was they made for this movie.
Like original? You're talking about
it was an original for the movie. It was Big
Gun.
Because
they've only done that twice because they did Thunderstruck for Maximum Overdrive.
Yeah.
That was the lead track on that soundtrack, and then this was their lead. They were the lead on this one. Their songs have been in movies, but yeah, you're right. I think this was the last one that they did original. But that was real fun, man. Also, going back watching Ted Lasso season 1 and 2. God, such a good show, man.
Dude, they start to drop promo images. I feel like trailers coming out soon, and I'm excited.
It has to. They're saying it's coming out in the spring, which I'm hoping it's
because they got a couple big series coming up, so it's got to be attached to one of those.
Yep.
By the time the trailer comes out,
I don't know when Severance season 2 comes out. Probably later in the year, if that. And
that might be in every 2 years because of the cast.
Okay. So I'm thinking I'm hoping we get Lasso probably in early April. That'd be awesome. I'm really excited about that too. Yeah, such a good watch through, man. Such a great show, and then enjoying the fact that Everything Everywhere All at Once is winning a ton of awards. Also, I did catch The Whale, which was a good movie. Another one where like it's definitely an Aronofsky film. I think Brandon Fraser was great. Do have a recommendation, guys, if you have a chance. It's like a 90-minute video, but it's a panel of Hollywood actors for Vanity Fair.
Oh, like that round table one?
That round table one where it's Ki-Hu Kwan, Brandon Fraser, Adam Sandler, Colin Farrell, and I forget his name. He played Elvis. I forget his name. Austin Butler, I think is his name. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
They talk about just their experiences of going in and out of Hollywood, their struggles, and there's so much really good like commentary from Brandon Fraser, Colin Farrell actually too, his struggles, and Ki-Hu Kwan about like how they were pretty much for a stretch like thought their careers were done. And Ki-Hu Kwan's the significant one because he was out of film for 25 plus years, you know, working in the background.
I forgot he did choreography too. I want to say he did X-Men or X2, one of the two.
He did X2. I think he did the one as well. That one action movie, the one. That's why he's so good. That's why he's so good is because he's so well trained. I didn't realize like how well trained he was on action, but yeah, that's why he did such a phenomenal job on that movie. But he's going to be in Loki season 2. He and Michelle Yeoh have their own show on the Disney Plus network. Like he's getting a resurgence, man. I love it, man, and I hope he wins the Oscar for Best Supporting, man. I hope so. I really do, because his story is such a great story. But then again, so is Brandon Fraser's. Like where he, like, I'm not talking about the struggling part. I'm talking about kind of like them finding their place back in Hollywood after it kind of chewed them up and tried to spit them out, you know. So yeah, some good stuff, man. I looked back a lot. There's been some tremendous films last year, so it's going to be a very interesting award season just because there was some good stuff. And then all of a sudden I get thrown Last of Us on Sunday night, and I'm like, holy shit. So I'm ready to talk about that too, because there's a lot to unpack there, man.
There's so much.
Yeah.
I got two quick things for me. I finally caught up on Doom Patrol. Speaking of Brendan Fraser, he plays Robot Man. It's still the same show. It's very weird. It's very bizarre. It is very much that original run. I want to say original, but the reimagined run. Was that Enos? Garth Ennis?
Garth Ennis, yep.
Yeah, it was very much. It's very much still in his vein in terms of what they were going for with the show, and it's still just super bizarre. Like there's guys in like black theater suits, like the stage suits, so you don't see them, just like with scissor arms as like henchmen. It's very weird.
Yep.
And last year they had a guy who had a bicycle like wheel for a head. It's very weird. but still very fun.
Sounds bizarre.
Yeah.
The running buttholes. That was
they also it's a recurring thing every season. They have the butts, and now they're dealing with zombie butts.
Zombie butts.
Oh,
yeah,
the most dangerous of butts.
Yeah, every time I see that, I want to clip that out and send it to noobs and just be like, butts. There you go. For games on the more lighter side, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is a great game. Yeah. I'm almost done with it, and yes, I did clip out the part where Emperor Nefarious shows up just for Chloe. I definitely clipped that out. Speaking of movies, though, if anyone's in chat, we are going to be doing or continuing our monthly movie series. We're watching The Menu. We're trying to figure out a time. If you want to hit the exclamation point Discord, you can hop in and we'll get in and watch The Menu whenever we pick a day.
Great movie, man.
Which is a great reminder we're live on Twitch. If you're listening on a podcast service, we're live over at twitch.tv/MrWartburg. That's MrWartburg, because it's just got to be super German. It can't be an E. So, I think that's the rigmarole out of the way. That's the big stuff. So now it's time to dive into The Last of Us. Now that it has premiered on HBO, the pilot is out. We have 9 more episodes to go. It's a 10-episode run, right?
I believe so.
9 episodes. It's a 9-episode run.
Is that right?
I was looking at the IMDb, and I remembered. So now I know when a big story beat happens because someone's only got a few less episodes than the rest.
You're correct. 9 episodes. Yeah,
so
probably because the first one was an hour and a half.
It was, it was double episode length, give or take.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. So 8 more to go. General takeaways before we get into spoilers. What were you guys' thoughts? We'll start with our guest, Mr. Nick Schwartz.
Yeah, Nick.
I really enjoy. I mean, at first, I wasn't sure about the casting. I mean, I love both actors. I was like, but I'm curious to see how it translates from the game into this world. And I loved it. I thought they did a fantastic job. We didn't get to see Ellie as much, but what she did so far is very interesting. I think she was very funny too at certain moments. And I love they're keeping a lot of it consistent with the game. There's a few differences that we can get into in the spoiler talk time, but a lot of the stuff that they kept the same I thought worked really well, and a lot of the stuff that they added in to kind of build the narrative of the world, right? Like before things go wrong, when things are wrong, I think added a lot of. I didn't think there was a way to add to the universe of the show, and they found a way to do that with several different scenes and several different things that I didn't expect. And again, we can go into that more when we get into the spoiler talk. But I think what they did was they introduced this world that has already been in 2 games and also a comic book series, and then a DLC, I guess. And they were able to take it, build on it, and make it to this point. In my mind, it feels not better, but it feels like a little bit more clear, if that makes sense. And I'm excited to see where they go with it because there's a few things that they're hinting at that I think add to what the mythos of the story already is.
Fusion.
As excited as I was very apprehensive, even though I know the showrunners were the guys that did Chernobyl, which was an incredible miniseries on HBO.
So good.
I was, hearing that Bella Ramsey was cast as Ellie, I was wondering, like, okay, maybe the energy is going to be a little different just because, obviously what we saw from her in Game of Thrones, she's an incredible actress. And the crazy thing is that was her first acting gig, by the way, guys. So this is her second overall, like, major acting gig. Like, she just, got into acting at the age of 10 and then boom, got cast, as Lyanna. Was it Lyanna?
Two of the biggest series probably of all time.
Yeah. And she had probably one of the coolest fucking deaths in Game of Thrones ever.
Yeah, she did.
But
they both did.
They both did, actually. Yeah, you're right. Both did. Yeah, exactly. Both she and Pedro Pascal. I was a little more concerned about Pascal just because, like, I think he's a great actor. I just maybe was like, maybe this isn't really going to be a good fit for him. And then that first act happened, and I found myself like, holy shit! Like they hit their marks with that. I know we're going to go into further in here in a little bit, but that really made me feel like whatever apprehension I had the first half hour, boom, when we hit the end of that first act, I was like, okay, they're gonna do this right. Like, I felt like they're gonna nail this. And closing the show with that song, I thought it was like incredible as well. Like that Depeche Mode song, like fuck man, like these guys know what they're doing. They're taking a lot of the beats from the game, but they've translated them well to fit them in an hour long of television each week, right? There will be some things that they have to obviously push through to get faster because of the story that we're telling. Obviously, the way, like, kind of like, I think you said this, Nick, kind of like you have some assumptions like, hey, okay, they're probably gonna have to, and I'm assuming you're thinking like maybe they're gonna have to make a few changes here and here and here in the story because it won't fit based off of if it's a 9-episode show, right? And I agree with that, but man, the pacing, the sound, the score was incredible, the cinematography was incredible. That first act will just like stand in my mind because I didn't think I could get emotional twice with that, watching this, seeing it again, and I did. Like, yeah, it was incredible, man. I'm gonna say, like, if you tell me give me a score of it, I'm gonna say a solid 9 out of 10 because it was just really, it hit everything I was expecting, and I was like, holy shit. And the casual viewer can be pulled in, people that didn't play the game and they don't want to know about the game. Now they're like, okay. And Wartburg, I want to bring up this little nugget. We both have talked about my favorite comic book translation, Y: The Last Man, and where it failed was...
That's on my note sheet.
I knew you were going to put it down, man. That's why you and I get along so well, man. Y: The Last Man had everything The Last of Us has, except for one thing, in that there isn't something supernatural taking place, right? Mm-hmm. That's the biggest problem with Y: The Last Man. It's a social commentary that worked well as a story in a comic book or in a graphic novel that had a hard time because we're so programmed to have this ethereal or supernatural or something major, and you're just finding out it's like, no, it's just really a social commentary. And that's where I think it had problems with the casual moviegoer, the casual TV viewer not buying into the Y: The Last Man. This is basically for me Y: The Last Man, but like with the volume at 11. Really, that's what it was.
It certainly helps it's on HBO.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And that's why you and I were both like FXX. Was it FFX?
Yeah, it was FX on Hulu.
FFX on
I was
Hulu.
like,
and
if
I was
this was Prime FX, Y: The Last Man, I'd have been in.
Or if it was on
Hulu?
If it was on Amazon TV, I know Amazon probably would have made it better. But it was still going to be a hard struggle just because of the content of the story itself. It's missing some of that drama that people have gotten used to with these type of shows.
It was a less, like, I want to say it was similar, but almost more fantastical. Like, dark, while like not logistically making sense. Whereas like that's what makes part of The Last of Us so fucking scary. Is when I want to talk about that the cold open, the flashback, the 1960s.
Oh God, yeah, with John. Is it John Hanna or I forget his name?
John something, and the other guy's Christopher Heyerdahl, who I know more.
Yeah, John Hanna.
Yeah,
John Hanna from
he was
Agents
in
of S.H.I.E.L.D., The Mummy.
Yeah.
And so both great character actors to have in that flashback, and their interaction and his monologue about fungus and like evolution and what it will do when things change and we're not ready.
Yeah.
Damn, what a way to set the scene.
The bit about what if the Earth were to grow.
Yeah, and that's when
warmer.
That's when it
and
hinges
like,
and you realize, oh shit, that might happen.
I got chills when that happened.
Yeah,
it was phenomenal
because he plays it so well. Like all it would really take would be just
dead serious. If you don't take me,
like,
if you don't believe me, everyone's gonna die.
Like like the host is like, oh, that can't happen unless something crazy. He goes, like, what? Really, all we need is for it to go 2 degrees higher and a little warmer. And you're like, oh shit! Like you're looking around, like, all right.
That, and there's one small like throwaway line that's just like a sideline from Bella Ramsey. That moment about like the what if Earth was 2 degrees warmer, like that like pin drop moment, and a line from Bella Ramsey much later in the episode. 2 best parts of the entire premiere for me, and it's a damn great premiere.
Yeah.
So my only other big thing was that like going into it, I was like, oh, I forgot Anna Torv was in this. I love Anna Torv. She's awesome. Fringe is one of my all-time favorite sci-fi shows. And I watched like half of Mindhunter, and then it just time kept getting away from me. But she was awesome in that too. So I was very excited to see her. Wouldn't have pegged her as Tess, having played some of the first game.
Sure.
It didn't, especially the voice. It's very different, but it works because she plays hardened badass extremely well.
She did. Yeah.
So I thought it was great to see her in that role. Also great to see Gabriel Luna because he got screwed out of his
Ghost Rider
show.
Man.
Oh yeah.
Great to see him actually have a premiere role and like a big role too, because he's in all 9 episodes on IMDb. So it's not all going to be flashbacks, I don't think, with him. But still, 9 episodes, and probably what's going to be the biggest show of the year, unless House of the Dragon comes back this year, which I don't think it is.
I don't think so.
I think it's next year.
I think it's 24.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool to see. I loved having the voice actors for Marlene as the live action version. I don't think we see that enough.
Merle Dandridge, I think is who it is. Yeah.
And it certainly helps that it was a motion capture face performance. Like, it wasn't, an issue where, like, it's just a random person and they use his voice kind of like God of War. Judge doesn't really look like him, and it was somebody else's model, but it's Judge's voice. So, like, this is a 1-to-1 case, and it was really, really well done. I really like that character. And that, like, what does a freedom fighter look like in a post-apocalypse? That's a very interesting character. So before I jump back into the more spoiler talk, Nick, I know obviously we've mentioned you played the game a lot. You've played both all the way through. I have not, actually. I've only played, I want to say, like the intro segment of the first one.
Okay.
I just kind of bounced off it. And maybe it was the gameplay. I don't know. I have this habit of then realizing 5 years later, I should have kept playing, and that'd have been fine. So I'll probably go back and play it. I do that too.
I actually did that with that game.
I want to see the most recent one for me was the Outer Worlds. I like bounced off it completely when it came out. And I was like, damn, this game fucking rules.
Right?
I need to do that. I did the same thing because I haven't gone back yet.
Yeah. Because once I don't know what it is. Maybe I was just playing Fallout again, and my brain clicked back into this is how Obsidian makes games. And it worked. I don't know. But Fusion, what is your history with the Last of Us series?
Played the first one, replayed the remastering on the PS4. Haven't played the PS5 version yet. And I dipped into Last of Us 2 just at the beginning of it. So I really haven't gone all the way through on that one. So I do know the story for both all the way in and out. So nothing's gonna like catch me by surprise. It's kind of like God of War Ragnarok.
I hope something does. I hope they change some things.
Okay, well that's
make
true.
Great adaptation.
That's fair. That's fair because great TV is still being able to run as close as you can to the original IP, but at the same time throwing in some shocking moments. And I think they have a few things up their sleeve to really shock the dedicated fans because it is one of the most well known. Like if I have to say, I'm not going to say it's like one of the top 10 greatest games of all time, but I'm going to say in like. Not a pantheon of them, but I'm going to say maybe it is in the top. It's definitely in the top 20. I don't know where I go.
If you go from PS3 on, like that era on, it's definitely in that Mount Rushmore of like what we would call modern, like
modern
gaming.
games. Yeah,
that makes sense.
So that's where I would put it.
Sure.
One more takeaway for me was that I was a little leery because Craig, did he say Mazin?
Yeah, Mazin.
So some of his dialogue and interviews about his thoughts on video games were very much like, dude, you didn't have to say that. Like, you're a great TV producer. Man, like, he was the comment of, like, people are going to, like, really buy in more because it's real death. And I'm like, well, it's not, because I'm pretty sure Pedro Pascal's alive. I'm pretty sure all these people are not the characters. They're actors. Everybody knows
Ideally.
That, right? Like, unless you're, pulling a fucking John Landis, nobody should die. Sorry, I had to make an actual historical poll there. Had to do it.
That's fair.
But, and it's it was one of those like weird eras of Hollywood where it's not. They made movies so much different than we do today.
Oh yeah,
I could have made a way more on the nose like pop culture commentary with one certain something Aldwin.
No.
I won't.
No, we won't.
But I didn't. Okay, so I had that going in. I was like, man. He really doesn't seem to really like video games, which is fine. You don't have to. But some of the dialogue was even just like, it's the lesser version. I'm like, that's really not great. Don't do that. But damn, it still made a great TV show, though. The guy knows how to fucking make awesome television. And very, very loving it. Very much so loving it so far.
Well,
hold on.
Help
that story is just so good out the gate. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that story alone, even if you were to take out, let's say you don't like the gameplay of The Last of Us, the story alone, I think, is enough to like jettison that to one of your top games of all time kind of list, just because it's a commentary, it's all this other stuff, but it's also like just really emotional and it's for a video game story. I think that was kind of one of the first times where you saw it like, oh, this is like a really interesting medium to tell a story, and if you didn't have the gameplay in it at all, as you can see here, it's like it carries itself. Yeah,
Yeah, it was very much a games are growing up kind of moment when The Last of Us dropped.
Yeah,
because I mean we were just coming off the generation where like Kratos was having like sex games,
Yeah,
like. in the middle of like the story. It was very much a like beat 'em up, mash 'em up era, and that was one that really I think elevated the medium. And I'm glad they're doing it justice.
Me
so
too.
While Mason may have unnecessarily kind of had some put downs, I'm very glad Druckmann's involved. So of course, there's major pushback there.
But you have to like take it with a grain of salt because Mason, as much as you say, "Hey, this guy did Chernobyl," like, "Hey, he's got to."
Don't get me wrong,
but hold on, he did the scary movies and he did the 2 Hangover sequels, which are just pure dog shit. So like you have to take what he says with a grain of salt because he may be he may be a really good producer, but he sounds like he's a personality that leans more towards Hollywood, studio Hollywood, than he does creative Hollywood, if that makes sense. Like that's like his personality, but. All that aside, like as long as he has the right team around him for The Last of Us, as long as we're not getting another like season 2 of Walking Dead where like they just like the studio and the station
like, hey, Frank Darabont, you're done.
Yeah, like all of that shit, which I highly doubt because HBO, as much as we talk about how they've really Warner Brothers has really crapped on the DC properties over the last 40, 50 years, when they have a drama. When they realize they have a good drama show, they let it run its course. Like they don't get in the way of that. That's a fact.
Yeah, like
That's
HBO still is. I mean, like look at Watchmen, right? Like they know how to make top tier stuff, even if it's not the traditional kind of like drama stuff.
But it's not always home runs because they canceled Lovecraft Country, which was a pretty good show. It wasn't a great show, but it was a pretty good show.
And the
that deserved a
was
season 2.
They had the Minx, right?
I think they did. Yeah.
Yeah. So. But Stars picked it up, and I'll actually now watch it. I meant to when it was on the Minx, but then they pulled it. Like, damn.
They killed Deadwood all those years ago, too.
Oh, yeah. What was it? What season did they just cancel it and then
3.
come back to it after 3? And then they came back years later.
3. And they were building to a story, like a conclusion. I think they had like a season or 2 left in them, and they were just like, nah, it's too expensive to make a West.
I'm really curious on what, like, there has to be a background story with the last couple seasons of Westworld because it doesn't make sense. Like, the first few seasons of that show were just incredible, and the last 2 were just purely like, they just ran out of, like, it just looks like they didn't even want to be there. So I'm very curious on.
Jonathan Nolan's like, hey, can I just go make my Fallout show now?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
God. Oh man, like don't even talk about the Fallout show because I'm so like on edge to get like any bit of news.
We'll
on
be
that
circling
show.
back to the Fallout show in a later question.
Boy.
So to move forward here, so now we've gone through our history with the game, some of our general takeaways from the pilot. We'll move into some more specific spoiler talk. So again, if you're in chat, just be aware of that. So spoiler talk. What was maybe the biggest surprise for you so far? Anyone want to go first?
I'll say this. There wasn't a surprise, but I'm glad they did the background on Sarah and like showed all that stuff.
Sure.
Biggest surprise, I think they are not using the spores. The spores are not a threat in this universe. Mm-hmm. They're using those, and also the infected, rather than just biting, have those little tendrils.
Yep.
And then I think the other biggest surprise too is that Joel doesn't do a lot in the current timeline. Oh, they also them shifting the time from 2013 outbreak to 2003 for the outbreak, making it so that 2023 is where they are instead of 2033. And the thing that is interesting about that in the future is at the start of the game, Joel, once you're in the current timeline, does a lot of when they're going to get the cache of guns from the guy who beat up Tess in this show. He kills a lot of people on the way there, along with Tess. And Tess is also pretty bloodthirsty. They moved away from that, and I think it's to kind of show the impact of the moment where he loses it and kills the guard, who also he happens to know, which I think is way cooler, too, because it's like, not only does he know him, he kind of has, it's not an intimate relationship, but he has like a one-on-one dealing drugs kind of thing with this guy. And then also, I didn't get this in the game. Maybe it's just because I'm dense, but they really hammered home the back and forth of this is that same moment that Joel lived 20 years ago, staring down the gun, the flashlight, with a young girl, this time instead of being in his arms, being right behind him, and him losing it. And I love that connection. And to have it be also someone that he knows really shows that he loses himself in the moment. And I thought that was such a cool change, but also so effective in terms of storytelling for this show.
Mm-hmm. So for me, I I was curious how they were going to pull off the intro because like they decided to go more of the 1-for-1 route.
Okay.
I know in our lead up, Fusion and I we were discussing, is that something they kind of tease out over the finale and then we get it in the penultimate? You know, like what really happened? Because that's a fairly common narrative structure where like that. The slow flashbacks that unfold over time into what really happened throughout the entire story.
Yep.
I was wondering, are they going to lead up to some big emotional beat where they finally connect and he like maybe not quite opens up to her, but she understands like where he's at and he then, you know, emotionally is more open with her going forward. But they decided to do it all at once, which was really effective, obviously. And I liked some of the change, like with the spores versus the tendrils, because I want to say there was an interview one of them did, but they were like, in discussion, we realized logistically spores wouldn't have spread as fast. Like it would have been way easier to detect in real life. Like screening processes would have caught it. It wouldn't have got around the world as fast as it does in our lore. And having it be like spreading this way with this type of fungus, it works better in terms of telling an actual fleshed out like lore scientific background, which I thought was really, really cool. I think other surprises. Again, I kind of spoiled it, but Anna Torv surprised me. I did not know she was even in this show.
I didn't recognize her either.
I was like, that's
she
Tess?
had that, the makeup.
Yeah.
Where she was beat up.
Yeah, and then I heard the voice, and I was like, oh, I got it. And I 100% see why people confuse her with Carrie Coon all the time. But, yeah, that was some of my big takeaways. That, and I'm wondering, you know, obviously we're getting to know Marlene here, but like, man, it makes me wonder what they're going to change. Because, like, obviously they have a 1-to-1 with her, but I'm like, and I know where the story ends in the Last of Us, and I'm like, okay, are they going to be, because, like you said, they're showing some more restraint in terms of the violence, which is necessary because it's gameplay versus, you know, an on-screen performance. There's no, like, personal interaction there with a controller. You know, you can kind of get not desensitized to it, but there's a visceral reaction to seeing it versus pressing the button to do the thing. And now they've clearly bridged that divide really, really well. And I'm wondering if that's going to carry over into any of their narrative beats towards the big finale, which they're definitely building to because it's been kind of teased. And there's a few shots in the trailer. I'm like, oh, I bet that's from the finale. Sure. But
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I'm wondering what will change because obviously it's a show they're probably going to want to have a season 2 or 3 of. So I'm wondering, do certain things we know happen in the game happen in the show?
Yeah.
In terms of major character moments and or deaths. The Fusion, what were your some big like surprises or what was most interesting to you? Full spoilers about the pilot.
Well, one, I really didn't think they were going to essentially do the 1-for-1 based out of Austin, like that whole opening scene act. I didn't really think they were going to do that. And the cinematography there was brilliant because there were times where it felt like a video game. Like they stylized it so much like the game, and the camera work there was incredible. Like I really think that they really like saw that intro and they felt like, hey, we want to nail this. But it felt like even like just when they pull up to the three-way stop where you just see the sign for Austin, you're like, God, like this, they're really doing it. Like they're going to do this. And I know that they're not going to translate everything from the story, like exactly, but the fact that they really did that and were able to modernize it and make you feel really pulled in by Sarah's character, I didn't think I was going to, like I said earlier, I didn't think I was going to get emotional again. And I did, you know, all the way to the end. Brutal. And like Nick said, it's a really good point here. We knew how violent he was, how violent Joel was, right, in the game. Up and like when we get into introducing Ellie and going on the journey, we know this a little bit more about his story. Where here, there's a little less violence. The one thing I thought was interesting though was I noticed we kind of see a bit of it's hinted by her mannerisms, a darker side to this Ellie. Like kind of like, you know, when he's beating down the soldier, she kind of just gets really like her facial expression goes from like being terrified and confused to being like, all right, she's kind of into it. Not just that she feels safe, but more of like, I'm into watching this violence. And I'm like, we're probably going to get a little bit of a different story about Ellie then. Maybe something like that recently happened to her that created a bit of a violent streak for her. So maybe the finale is going to be a little bit different than we're expecting based off of that. Or maybe it's not, because I think about this, and one thing with this show is they can't really kind of put those kind of small subtle changes into this and then not pay them off at the end. And I think that we're probably going to see something about her story where she maybe have a bit more of a violent streak earlier on than we think, compared to like the game. And so and obviously you guys know about what takes place with her character in the second game. So I think that we're probably going to push some of that stuff, maybe pulled in a little earlier, where some of the stuff in the first game gets pushed back because we're going to go farther along. We can't just go one for one. This season is the first game and season 2 is the second game. Like, obviously we're not going to do that, especially if this show can go on for 3 or 4 seasons, right? We're not going to do that. But that was the big thing for me was I think Bella Ramsey was great in it. I liked her energy because I was very curious on how she was going to play the role, if she was going to play it more of a timid, weaker role. But I like that she has that fire. But then, like I said, when that confrontation happens, to see her response to it, I'm like, okay, I got to know where we're going to go with her next, because there's something there that that's gonna be a little different than what we know of the character from the game. So yeah, that's the big thing for me. The other big thing was, fuck, man, I thought I was going to get a clicker confrontation in the first episode, but we're not going to get
that reveal for its own episode.
Yeah,
I know. And then, of course, if you paid attention on YouTube, there is a clicker in the very last shot up at the top of the building. There's one up there as Depeche Mode's playing in the background. Yeah, I don't know. You have to really watch for it, but like as they're doing the pan out shot of them walking into the city, and the shot goes up over the tower, over the buildings, maybe like a millisecond. You have to like freeze it, but there's a clicker on the top left just like looking down at them, and that's boom, it's really fast. But I thought that was kind of cool, but at the same time I thought I was going to get a little more of that. Like, we're going to get a little bit more of the creatures outside of the first act. So, but I get it, we're establishing the societal failure and the rebuild and the law and order and all that stuff. I get why we're less of that in the second act of this movie, second and third acts, versus what happened in the first act. So, but yeah, man, those were my big things, honestly. Like, especially Ellie, that's the one that stood out to me. Like, I got to know more where we're going with her story.
I'm curious with her as well. There's a couple of things I followed up on. This one, there was a video about like where the fungus like originated.
Oh yeah,
I
saw that.
So the difference being in the game, they mentioned in an article South America having issues with, like, I think it was meat or some kind of distribution that they were having food, and a lot of it could be traced back to that. But if you notice a time difference, 2013 to 2003, Joel talks about how he's on Atkins.
Yep.
And a lot of the stuff that they're making around is like flour based.
Yep.
And flour is like a big, I guess, export or import, I guess, from Jakarta, from Indonesia, which is where they mentioned on the radio where all the stuff had gone down. So there's a theory going around that, is this all like, did the fungus spread through baked goods and flour and like certain distribution through that way? It's just kind of a cool little weird thing that you notice. And then like, little ticks like the kid losing his ability to control his arm while he's in class because he's infected. The bit with the grandmother, like,
oh yeah,
God, in the background, that has put me on edge forever. And then also just the relationship with Joel and Tommy. Tommy is like right out the gate in this, as opposed to just like showing up later. We see that why Joel left to go get him, where then they came back, all that stuff. They changed some of that. And then one thing I just wanted to touch on real quick before we do anything else is you mentioned this different take on Ellie and like what's going on there. Chris Mazin did I think he was on the podcast that Troy Baker's hosting for the show.
Okay.
And he was saying that the show is also an exploration of love being toxic too.
Okay.
Meaning that, like, so while the story is a love story originally, right? Like, that, as we know, they come together. It's like this, I think the show is designed to kind of show us like the darker side to it too. Like, obviously we know there's a dark side to it, but like much more of that toxic, like, this can feed you and you can feed me and this can like kind of grow together. And I think that's what they're kind of hinting at with her kind of like being into that scene where she's like leaning in and like really like,
Yeah.
oh, So I think they're gonna change that aspect of the story, but I'm curious like how far they take it. Like, what does it mean? Like the confrontation with David later on in the series.
Sure.
A lot of that I think can be impacted, but it's so cool that they've built a lot of this lore and there's already all these theories and things. Oh
yeah, my favorite one I saw was actually today that apparently someone had did the numbers and the San Antonio Spurs were the last team to play NBA basketball
in both versions.
In both versions, right? Yeah. But yeah, they did the numbers and they were like, yeah. So just so you know, the last NBA player to ever have a double was Tim Duncan. He had he had a triple double 2010 on the last game ever played in the Last of Us universe. And I'm like, just like it's so cool, like you said, the flower thing, because someone really broke down the idea of like, hey, Atkins at that time, blah 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 blah. We hadn't really taken a focus on like gluten-free diets or gluten for another 6 or 7 years, right? So like a ton of flour was being imported for, like you said, from Jakarta, like around that time. It's like, oh, okay, well, it does make sense that, something overseas, just kind of like with where we're at with COVID, this idea of like we're like, this other country where they bring this infection to us, and it happens. And what'll be interesting though is how close this commentary could be mirrored to the current pandemic, because obviously we're going to get those 20 years filled in spots over the next 8 episodes, right? How the government responds to it, how the global response is, a political response, social, all that stuff. We're going to probably get somewhat of a commentary on that. Maybe not too much, because it's a lot like The Walking Dead, where it's like the breakdown of society. Like, yes, we have these monsters around us, but people also have gone fucking crazy, which is the what pushes The Walking Dead was zombies aren't your biggest problem. People are your biggest problem in The Walking Dead. So let's see how much of it is that here, or is it more of it's a political commentary, like the politics of like taking care of people, building and controlling people. That's the big thing. I don't want it to seep too much into like a Paul Anderson's kind of like Resident Evil umbrella type of thing. Don't want to go that far. But at the same time, I don't want to go too far into like Walking Dead, where everybody outside of the gates of every secured zone are fucking crazy. Like, I don't really like, find me a balance. But like you said, Nick, there's that. I know now, like, hey, in the game we get the symbiotic relationship that love prevails, right? There's some darkness in that. Let's be real. There's 20 years of like some really bad stuff that Joel has seen, and so maybe some of that does affect her at the end of this season, like in a bad, not necessarily a good way, in a bad way, and we'll see where the characters go. But it's very interesting how they're taking this, and they're taking a lot of the beats, but at the same time they're making it their own, which is really good. I'm very happy about that. So this is one episode. This can really shit the bed in episode 2, but I don't have that concern like I did going into episode 1. I don't.
Yep. I want to give a shout out to Twitch chat. Number 1, hey, what's up, Dennis? Thanks for the bits. He says that's my boy. I'm assuming he's talking about Nick.
Maybe.
Probably. And Trenton as well. Spores, that was the other part of the interview I saw. Logistically, spores wouldn't work because everyone would always have to be in gas masks every time.
Yeah.
It'd be like
it was a shot
moon
issue.
dust. Like, it'd get fucking everywhere, right? Like, it would ruin everything.
Yeah, they were also worried about like the ability to shoot folks with masks, especially since it's a show that's like. And
I'm sure Pedro Pascal would have said no if it was a mask.
He's probably tired of it too.
He's tired of it. He's like, I come on, guys. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Wartburg. One thing though, I don't know. I wanted to ask you this: did you watch the preview for next episode, or like coming up?
A little bit. It was kind of on in the background while I was turning my computer and stuff back on.
Do you get the impression that they might do a lot more flashbacks than we were expecting? Because it looked like there was a bit with Nick Offerman, who is playing Bill.
Yeah, I think in those, that's where I think
like flashback stuff.
The Tommy stuff's going to come in, where that side of the story is going to get more the, where's he been? What's he up to? What are the characters around him? What's going on with them? Because we didn't get, pilot intros for them. So it's maybe the mechanic for how they get us to emotionally respond to these characters a little quicker, as opposed to just one-off beats in a game. So that's where I'm guessing we'll see most of it. Plus, curious. Any excuse for more Nick Offerman, I'm here for.
I'm excited. I was glad he was in the cast.
Like, yeah, that's another one of those. Like, man, they are not screwing around with the cast here.
Not at all.
And yeah, like to our point about the logistics of how the things spread. Yeah, I saw that leaked audio, the audio clip with Pascal's like character mentioning like some of the theories around the time when everything collapsed. I think it's when he's talking to Ellie, like explaining, because obviously she was born after, so like explaining the world before and how everything came to be as it is. I was watching, I think it was Alana Pierce's review. It would have been nicer for like an extra 10 minutes in the quarantine zone, like more day-to-day life, like plus a little more intro with Tess, especially because spoilers, she's not going to be around the whole season. But it still worked. It was pretty quick and it was effective because the intro was so emotionally impactful. You want it like then you got to get to introducing Ellie and the core component around why she's in the story and why she's so important to the actual world. And then that needs to be your emotion, like your beat to end on. That is a shitload to do in an hour and a half, and they did it very, very well. I still would have liked a few more, like a little more. What's going on with this world? Like you mentioned, fusion of the political commentary. Like what's like why are the Fireflies doing what they do?
Yeah,
like because clearly they kind of like hint at it a little bit. It's a police state. Like, and then you can have the conversation: is that necessary in a post-pandemic world, like a lockdown, billions dead kind of world? Do you need to have that kind of control to restart society? Like you can have those kind of conversations. I don't think we're gonna get that with this show. It's not that kind of show, I don't think. But I hope they kind of, like you said, they kind of show it in different lenses, like with the community Tommy's in, like as a different. Hey, this is also a way to survive. That's just different. So I'm very much so looking forward to how he's going to get woven into the show because as you mentioned, it's clearly very different already from the game.
He seems much more integral to a lot. And also is the main reason for Joel's wanting to leave, which is completely different from the game. And also he's looking for a battery as opposed to a cache of guns. So it's like, well, automatically he's going to do something as opposed to like stock up and fight, kind of thing.
Well, I think also we're forgetting that Marlene's character can be the one that we shoot back to the quarantine zone to kind of show what's going on with the Fireflies, like seeing why they're doing what they're doing. Like we're probably going to rubber band back and forth between how far they go on the way to Wyoming, like how far they go, and versus what takes place back over here in Boston. So, and there's and the one thing about HBO shows we don't touch on is that they did it in Game of Thrones. They've done it in many shows, like even Barry, where major characters will just show up, and we don't have to have like this full introduction to them. We don't have to have a massive background story. That they show up and then they become an integral part of the show. And along the way, we get bits and pieces of like why they're important, like what their story is and why they're important. And I think we're probably like Offerman's character, Bill, like you said, it may be having to do with Tommy and where he's at. If he's in Wyoming, we're just assuming that's what's happening here, right? It could be a little bit different. That's the thing, is that they could change a little bit of that stuff up because obviously the central characters are Joel and Ellie, right? Those are vital to the story. Outside of that, we can tweak some of the other things because it is 20 years past and a lot of things have changed, and maybe some of the things that we think would happen aren't really that way. Like once they leave the city, we don't know exactly what's going to be out there and how it's structured outside of that quarantine zone, and we can find out. Obviously the big thing is they're probably going to stop very early on and say, okay, Ellie, what the fuck? Like because of the way it ended, like we just were like, okay, we need to talk about this, but we got to address this and we got to run. Obviously at the very beginning we're going to be like, let's stop. We got to know what the fuck's going on, Ellie, and that's going to be the big thing, the big part of the first act of the next episode. But I'm very interested to see like just the flashbacks. I tend to think that we'll probably get some, but not as many as we think. Like we may get a few, but then we're going to get a lot of, like I said, rubber banding between different areas, and that's okay because 9 episodes. If we're just focusing on Joel and Ellie for every single episode, the meat of every episode, it's going to wear people down. That's the big thing. Like Game of Thrones, the one thing they did was they had so many threads going on. Some of their better shows have so many different threads, and we can have so many threads with this to tell those other side, like the secondary stories of like what's taken place the last 20 years, what's going on with the government, what's going on with the governments of the world. Like we can tell those stories outside of just strictly Joel telling Ellie, "Hey, let me give you a history lesson in case you don't know." So it'll be fun to see where they go next episode for sure. But yeah, man, I think like the way this ended, like it's just like, okay, this didn't have my heart just pumping at super fast. Like, okay, it was just more like, I'm interested now. I'm very interested on how we're gonna tell this story and maybe make some changes along the way.
True.
Did you feel like the death of Sarah was that much more like impactful in this too? There's something about the way that they do that whole scene where she is like in his arms and like they're trying. In the game it happens much faster. Like it feels like it's over much faster.
Yep.
And in the show it's so much more like, I know, baby, I know. Like that. I literally started to tear up in that scene because let me tell you, since having a kid, I've become a total wuss. Like anything that happens to any kid ever now just hurts me. But anything that happens
as you get older, like everything puts you into tears. Once you get past like your mid 30s, when you hit your mid 30s, it's like everything's just emotional. Like seriously.
Oh, I'm right there. I just hit 35, so I'm done, dude. It's all like.
Ted Lasso has that hug moment in season 1. You're like, fucking guys, like just tears rolling down. It happens.
But that sequence where he turns back to Tommy and Tommy says Joel, and then it goes back, and you don't know in that moment when she passed, but it's like it happened somewhere in that in between, and it's just, I don't know. Pascal is so good in that scene. It's so brutal and real. Oh, it's so much. And the game always like got me, but that got me way worse.
That and the slow, deliberate get to know her portion, like that, just the first
like the first 30 minutes of her
with her, and like getting to know how she how she's part of the world, like just interacts with everyone around her while still getting little spurts about like people realizing some shit's going down while she's just trying to go about her life, and then they have this intimate family moment and then everything goes to shit. Like, man, it was extremely effective. I think one of the best pilots I've ever watched.
The big thing about that was with Sarah's character in this show. She obviously, you had this feeling like she had to grow up faster than she could for some reason. Like there's no mom around. There's a story there, which obviously we'll tell a little bit. We'll get flashbacks, I'm sure, with more Sarah. This isn't going to be the end of seeing her, I'm sure. We're probably going to get a few more flashbacks. But, like, the character felt a little more
Actually, I think
older.
She only has one credit on IMDb.
It's possible that they may
episodes.
not just list her. Two episodes, okay. So we're probably going to get one more flashback explaining a little bit more about their relationship. But, like, the relationship is obviously she had to grow up faster. She had to get, grow up faster because of whatever happened in their family. And then this idea of like her caring for everybody, but it's not overly emotional, but she's very like staunch and very like just she moves around like an adult, right? And then in that moment of panic when they're running, she becomes a child again in that truck, right? And then when they're running away, she becomes that child again. She's in the child state up until her death, and that's where it eats you because you're like a big part of Joel is now gone. It's not just his daughter. It's like she basically held him and his life together at that point because of whatever happened. Yeah. And so just see Tommy, just like you said, when Gabriel Luna just says, she's gone. Like he just says, you don't see her in her death throes, right? You don't see that. You just know that that's it. And when we fast forward over to when he's beating that officer in that moment, this isn't going to be the only time where he reacts like that. We know that there's going to be another moment where, and it may be something very similar to what happened where he has to make a decision where he didn't at that time 20 years before, and he's doing it now. Or it may be something else where we get a flashback to show something that affected him with him and Sarah, to where there's a situation where he and Ellie, and he has like almost like a PTSD response to it, and he goes into that kind of that state again. And it's obviously going to have major repercussions to their story, because it feels that way. He got his hands bloodied right at the end of this episode for her, and then like I said, the whole thing with Ellie's completely different in terms of like makes you curious on where she's going with her story. But yeah, man, like just Sarah's story really got to me. I didn't think I was, like I said, played the game like, okay, I know what's going to happen, I know it's coming, and then fuck, man, you're just sitting there and you're tearing up. You're like, God. Like, I can't believe, like, I knew exactly beat for beat what was going to happen, and I'm still getting emotional watching it because they do such a great job of it.
It was brutal.
Yeah.
Anything else stand out to anyone? I'll if nobody else does, I can get to the line that was like, damn, that was fucking cool.
Oh, I want to hear that.
That's-
The one thing I just want to say real quick is I really like that they made. I think it was Tommy that they made a veteran.
Yeah.
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 And I think that adds a whole different element then too when he has to kill the soldier as he's. I mean, unbelievable. At first, I was trying to figure out. Oh, are they trying to imply that one of the two did it? And it was like, oh, it has to be Tommy because Tommy's an expert with the rifle and all that stuff.
Sure.
And Joel picks up the wrench like he does in the game too. So it was like that was really interesting.
Yeah, Trenton in the chat just bring that up, and it's a good point. Was that Joel's truck or Tommy's truck with that? Because there was a Desert Storm sticker on the truck, and I saw that.
And Tommy would be a little young for Desert Storm. The
Yes.
first,
Maybe
the
it
first
was
Desert
Joel.
Storm.
91, 92?
Yeah, that was 91. He'd have been a little young. Joel is what he said, 38 in 2003.
Yeah, 36, 38, 38.
So like
Maybe
he would
it
have
was
been
Joel.
very early
Interesting.
20s, early
That
to
could have
mid
been Joel.
20s. You know, so like maybe Joel's the veteran because that would explain why he's so
Unless-
capable.
That's true. Unless Tommy enlisted as like at 18.
Yeah, they
Possibly.
both can, but
Certainly.
and it's possible that they both can be. Well, and we're just assuming that Tommy is
And
younger.
Luna,
by the
he's
way.
older than he looks.
That's true.
We're just assuming that Tommy is younger because it's Gabriel Luna. We think, okay, he's younger. It could be possible that Tommy is the older brother of the two.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Sorry, Warburg.
Well, that and
Before
like
you go.
in universe, they've aged Pedro Pascal up for the character. Like the character is
Yep.
now older than he is, so that way when they want to push forward for part 2, it's not. It'll still work as well, and they won't have to do so much FX, special effects work to make him look older. So my moment was something that really established that people know Joel's a fucking badass. Was when Marlene, she's holding her guts in and talking about how I know what you're capable of after he's already like knocked Ellie to the floor and his foot's on the knife. She just looks up and goes, "What are they capable?" And it just kind of rests on that for like the briefest of moments, and you're like, "Oh shit." Joel and Tess probably killed a fuckload of people, and everybody knows it. That they do not. You do not fuck with those two. Like, damn, that is badass. Like, just to set that up through the lens of this new character who's like kind of like shocked to meet people like them. Man, that was fucking cool. Bella Ramsey nailed that line. That was awesome.
I like that they made what was his name? The guy who ended up dead at the end. The guy who had basically stolen the battery and then sold it. He was afraid of Joel. He was terrified of Joel.
He was like death. Like as soon as he was like, your guy isn't gonna come after me, right? You're like, oh, he's talking about Joel.
He's definitely talking about Joel. Yeah. Way different from the game because he didn't give a shit.
Yeah, that and like it's another one of those. It's different mediums, so you can use different storytelling techniques to get across the same meaning. Like we don't have to play through the violent parts to know, oh, this guy's gonna fuck a lot of shit up. Like it's that the implication, right? Like the read on somebody's face, right? Like the score, the music, the angle that they shoot something at. It can all tell the same story just in a different method, which I really like. And I really like how they've brought that into the television or TV kind of show space, which is what I would hope and really wish other people doing adaptations would pay attention to, but clearly very few do. It's really annoying. Damn, it's annoying.
Yeah, Netflix, you screwed up Resident Evil. You had one shot.
They did the Sandman. So
they did the Sandman, and that was perfect.
They got Castlevania.
That's true.
Castlevania was good.
That's true.
Castlevania was good.
And we'll get to stuff like Castlevania very, very shortly.
Okay. All right.
Any other closing thoughts before we move on to our last questions of the day?
So we've essentially missed 20 years of music. So
that's one thing. Someone did say the music that he
culture.
plays to Ellie has to be different.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Because the song came out well after.
Yep.
That's right.
Unless they're
So we're
doing
talking-
old history, which is totally valid. No, it's a fan. It's not real life, people. You can bend the rules a little bit.
Well,
yeah, but but pop culture's dead for the last.
But
20 years,
according to Mason, it's real death. So
yeah. Well, hey, they're blessed because they don't get the Star Wars sequel trilogy, so they don't
but they
get
also
that.
don't get Andor.
Oh, that's
don't get
true,
the-
man.
they
And
don't
the
get to finish the
Mandalorian. Come
prequel.
on.
They don't
Yeah,
get
but
to
I
finish
think
the
Pedro
prequel
would have been a little
series
busy,
Yeah.
fighting off clickers to do Mandalorian in this universe.
But maybe that's something that they touch on, like just the fact that they're kind of like it's very much so like Fallout, where so much of their pop culture is locked into an era because of what happened.
Oh, interesting.
And there's a lot of that aspect.
So we're basically going to get like indie rock band intros, and indie rock band endings for every single episode because it's
here's a big thing. A big part of our society is smart technology, right? Smartphones. They don't have that because
they never did.
iPhone came out in 2007, so where mobile applications became a big thing. So are we going to talk about
DVDs were the height of movies?
Rotary phones are still used, like phone booths, and old school flip phones are going to be the thing. Like, I know I'm thinking too much into it, but it'll be very interesting.
Me until 2010
because they can't easily access the internet on their phone to pull up a bunch of shitload of information, right?
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah,
some of the DVDs on the shelf were actually movies that didn't come out until after 2003. There were a couple of them.
I didn't even see the movies. I didn't even notice that. What movies did I miss?
I saw it. There was like an animated movie that didn't come out until 2014. I can't remember what it's called. And then there's something else from 2005, I think. But I watched a bunch of. I take in all these YouTube videos after I watch these shows. Yeah. I'm like, point out everything I missed, please.
Love that.
Yeah, those are good things, man. Those are always good to just hear people like catch that shit. Like, I didn't catch that. Oh, okay.
One last question, and I kind of hinted at a little bit of it. Do we think they're going to stick 1-to-1 on the ending? Clearly, they did on the beginning. The Last of Us, the first game. Do they stick 1-to-1 on the ending?
I think. I'm trying to think of what they would change. I think it's pretty similar. I think the difference is when Joel makes the decision he makes, it's going to be a lot more impactful because we're going to see a lot more of Marlene throughout the series.
Yeah, that's where I'm like, is she going to die? Because we know, I mean, at the time of the first one, we didn't know part 2 was coming. Druckmann probably did, but we didn't. So, writing for a future, as a series, do they keep her character around for like the Fireflies in the future? Or is she done now because she was in the game?
Well, the one thing we have to remember with Hollywood is they love spin-offs, right? And
that's true. That is certainly true.
It would be possible to have her lead a spin-off show.
It doesn't feel very HBO, but HBO is in a weird spot with the whole merger. Yeah. And plus, by the time this comes out in 2024, is that Comcast rumor legit? Like, are they really trying to get sold? Like, things might get real weird in the next couple of years.
We're getting a Jon Snow spinoff. Just so think about that.
Well, that got potentially on hold.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, it's something to think about because it may change up the ending a little bit here.
True.
Yeah. Oh, that could be interesting.
So then the other, one more question on Last of Us before we move on. And this is more, again, along the lines of future prognostication. Part 2. Mm-hmm. Does that get split into 2 seasons? Because to me, narratively, it makes sense. But I haven't really played it, so I can't conceptualize it as well as the first game, which I've watched more of.
Go ahead, Nick.
Just thinking out loud, I could see a reality where they do that because there's so much that's happening simultaneously that I won't spoil the game for you, but there's so much that's happening simultaneously with so many of the characters that I feel like you could potentially take that in the first half and then also within the second. And there's also so many other characters that we don't see. For instance, like Tommy and people like that, like their experiences up to that point, and then like what led them there and what happens to them after. That I very much could potentially see that happening, especially if like they were to limit the amount of episodes. Because we got a 9-episode run here. You could shorten it to like 7-8 episode run and then split them evenly that way. That way you're also not like grasping at straws if you're trying to fill those 2 seasons. And then also there's a bit at the end of the game that I think is so far removed from the rest of it that it makes sense to kind of have it almost either not as standalone, but like it takes up enough time to where I feel like it could be split into the second half of another season of something.
Sure.
It just depends on how they write the story beat. And then also if there's anything beyond, if they want to continue with that. So there's a chance that they split that. But I could also see it being like, oh, we don't want to expand too much on this. But that would be their best option because then they don't have to write a ton beyond where they are storyline wise at the end of 2.
And that does make me wonder, obviously with Bella Ramsey, is this a situation where it might wait 2 or 3 years before they actually film it? Because it's a decent time jump, right? Isn't it like 10 years?
4 years.
4 years? Okay, so not that much. Especially with younger actors, they're going to age like on screen
very quickly.
Quickly. Look at Stranger Things. So maybe they won't have to wait that long.
She's what, 19 now? So she's like, see, this is the thing
younger
with,
too.
Yeah, here's the thing with Hollywood. There's a reason why they historically cast 20-somethings for teen roles on television is because they're not growing up to, they're not going to hit a major growth spurt at that point, and that affects their show production, because when they have child actors and then from season to season they just shoot up, like the guys grow 6 inches taller, right? Things like that can really affect what they do on a show, and they have to kind of rework their story with the characters. That's why with some of the main characters they hire actors that are closer towards their 20s, because they're not going to hit growth spurts. So I think she's like 19 now. So she's like 19, from year to year, you probably won't see a huge shift in like her growth because of that. But even still, like there are ways to work out like a few years gap. And I'm going to go back to what Nick said about like seasons 2 and 3. I think with the second game, there's obviously in the first act of the second game a point where you could make a season out of that first act, and then the next season be the final 2/3 of the game in season 3, based off of like a pivotal moment in the game. So I think you could do that, but also this could be a story that goes a few years longer than that, and it doesn't have to center around like the Joel character because of his age. Obviously, if we kind of, or what HBO traditionally does is they could shift the lead character to someone else. You know,
kind
they
could
could shift the lead,
it a little bit.
almost anthologize it, yeah, and so it's possible,
like the good version of what they had to do with the Book of Boba Fett.
Yep. See, I don't want to go too much into
Tales
like
of the Bounty Hunter. I would have been so much more fucking in for that show, but that's beside the point. No Star Wars talk. We're done.
We got a whole episode of CGI Luke Skywalker. Come on.
I have thouts on what we're doing leading into Mandalore, and it is.
I know you do.
It still just upsets me, this decision.
I know. I still call that show Boba Fett and Friends.
It's really what it was.
Just because of the way it's done. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I think Warburg and I both, week to week, we would do our show talking about, like, what's the motivation here for Boba? Why is he doing this? Like, why is he doing
so nice?
This? Why is he doing that? Why is he taking over the entire the gang? Like, what's the motivation? And then that little flashback. Okay, because they killed a bunch of Tusken Raiders, but that really doesn't. That doesn't make sense. And it's like the pacing sucks. What are we doing? All right, here you go, guys.
Elephant shows up. Fuck, we're here. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course Cad Bane was, Warburg's favorite.
He was 70.
So, yeah,
unnecessary. Anyway,
but like, I think the pacing of this show, like, episode 2 is going to be very important for me because it'll establish what we're doing with the pacing of the show. Like the first episode is always about introducing the world and the characters within the world. Episode 2 is so important because it establishes what our pacing is going to be going forward. So I'm looking forward to that. And like I said, the music of the first episode was cool. I'm hoping we still get kind of that. We get drops of old, like, old some drop in 80s music and other things to kind of fit the mood of like what's going on there.
And because like a good excuse to bring in Trent Reznor because 90s.
There you go. It's a good point.
And he does really awesome soundtracks.
Yeah. But yeah. I was really I can't wait for episode 2. Like I said, this is going to be like Sunday night's going to be destination TV for me because I want to know what we're establishing now with the show, where we're going to go with it, and I'm like I'm geeking out for it.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of those week to week shows too. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you can gather around and talk.
It's funny you say that, but like I saw the internet just slam like, this is why I like to binge watch because now I can't wait. I'm like, you motherfuckers, this is the type of emotion I had to deal with 24, like week to week.
Oh,
this was the first 4 seasons. How I feel right now is that's how I felt for like 4 years with 24. And it was just, this is how we're going to stop. God damn it. Like, oh man, like I got to wait a whole week for this. Welcome to how we used to do TV, guys.
It's life, man. Lost. Come on.
Yeah. It's like hype is a thing.
Yep. Oh. Hey, Netflix is probably going to break away from the binge model here very soon.
Well, I don't think they want to because it's how they get away paying rights.
Yeah, but subs are really affecting them. That's the big thing, and I think that's the best way to
someone in chat. First time chatter fitness. Yes, it's a very good show. 100% watch it. Worth the sub to HBO.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is.
Plus, then you can watch a bunch of other awesome stuff like Peacemaker.
And
House of the Dragon.
Yeah. House of the Dragon. Let's see here. Doom Patrol.
Me showing off the wood burning.
Chernobyl's a good miniseries. I recommend Chernobyl.
Chernobyl's so good.
John Wick, all three John Wick are on.
That was HBO. I watched it through Hulu because I have HBO through Hulu. I just watched it on the Hulu player. But yeah, it's an HBO production.
Yep.
What a great show.
And like Warburg always talks about it, that miniseries of The Watchmen was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, they're
so good.
Every episode, goddamn 10 out of 10.
Yep.
Man, what a show. Can't believe they haven't done it. I mean, I know why they're not doing a follow-up because it's a hard story to follow up, clearly, because the comics haven't done it very well. But damn, what a season of a show that was.
Yeah.
But speaking of geeky stuff, I have another question for you.
Okay.
So, other gaming, because this is a game adaptation, and historically, they haven't been great. Some good ones. Obviously, The Last of Us seems on that path and is destined to probably go on to be maybe the greatest of all time, at least so far. But, Nick, you mentioned Castlevania. We've got Fallout in the pipeline. Halo just, sharded all over the internet on Paramount+. Plus. But there have been a few other big ones. But of the AAA ones, outside of animated adaptations, you can make the case for Sonic, I guess, because it has some real-life humans. And it was pretty well received. Same with Detective Pikachu. Of the, let's say, AAA games, in terms of like modern, non-Nintendo stuff, let's say.
Okay.
And maybe that's because they're easier to turn into animated adaptations. Just feels more the home for them. What other type of game or series that hasn't yet been adapted, or maybe has and you want to do differently? What is a series you're like, man, I really want them to do something with this, and how would you do it? Anybody want to start?
Nick, you're the guest.
I feel like, and I know they're going to do one, I believe, right? God of War is
yes,
going
that's
to do
been ordered to series.
Yep.
So, I think to do a show like that, you probably have to, one, just skip everything that had happened in the first three and surrounding games.
Sure.
And then, very much like Ragnarok has done, focus on the past. You can reference it almost like we're talking about with The Last of Us. You can talk about it, maybe even flashback every once in a while. But you follow a lot more of that story-driven stuff. And then action-wise, because it's not a game, you don't have to have all these different rounds of fights with different characters and things like that. So I think it can be much more story-based. It can be much more like the fights aren't long and like super visceral, but they're like really cool and like dramatic and impactful fights. I don't know. I'm curious to see how they pull it off, and I'm curious to see what that cast looks like because I actually don't know a lot about it.
And and Judge has campaigned for the role.
Has he really?
And he is a big dude.
He's big. He could pull it off. Who knows? He doesn't look like the character, like you said, but
yeah, he's clearly got the voice for it.
But
and I love him as
looking at Pedro Pascal, I didn't think that's Joel to me. Now I'm much more like, oh, that is Joel. This is just a different iteration of Joel.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
I'm curious.
Fusion, what would be your go-to? Because obviously your comic adaptation, your dream one was Y: The Last Man. And it didn't turn out so well. It was close, man. It was so close.
The first, let's be real. It's not a bad show. The problem with it is that the studio didn't want this. No one it just.
They didn't market it. It didn't get any airtime until 2 weeks before.
Yep. It was such an uphill battle. It was a losing. It was canceled before it even started. Let's be real about that one. You both are going to agree with this because after watching what they did with Andor and the political aspect of a galaxy and how where the social political lines are drawn and how people on the top live, people on the bottom live, and a world, a universe with so many moving parts outside of just Jedi and Sith and Skywalker, Mass Effect could be a really good show with the right network. And it has to be Amazon, has to be maybe HBO Max. It cannot fall in the hands of Hulu, FX. It cannot fall in the hands of Netflix because
Altered Carbon, I think, did a really good job of fleshing out a great cyberpunk world.
And that's
with the story, but the actual world building was really, really good.
It's a good point. Cyberpunk 2077, I could see that being a good Netflix show. Does that make sense? Okay. I can't see it being a good HBO show just because of the drama side of it.
And
Whereas,
Netflix did have Lost in Space.
Do we know? You may know this, Warburg. Does anyone own the television or film rights to Mass Effect?
The rumor is Amazon bought the rights, or it was in negotiations to do so. Okay. And they also, I think, own or have a production agreement with the people that did The Expanse, which was the heavy rumor that The Expanse crew and their production house, in terms of the VFX work, was going to be who was shepherding the adaptation of Mass Effect, because The Expanse was very, like, there's a lot of parallels in their storytelling.
And like I was going to say, it would have to be Amazon, it would have to be the Expanse team to really push this forward, because it is like,
if you're going to go hyper realistic, like live action type look to it.
Because they've shown what they can do to make it realistic, but at the same time they were able to create a much more political backdrop to the universe in the Expanse. So that's, for me, it's got to be Mass Effect, man. That's got to be it, because I'm getting my Fallout show. You know me, I'm a big Fallout guy. I'm finally getting my Fallout show.
Very curious why we haven't seen any more of that so far, because clearly it's been in production a while. Like, those stills leaked last summer.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, well, the sets and stuff. So I'm like, they were shooting last fall.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know how to feel about that show.
But then again, at the same time, maybe they're not done.
Hope.
You know, because, like, Goggins is pretty busy, right? Like,
you
know,
he rules too.
Like, on paper, it sounds. I like Jonathan Nolan. I think he's got a good head for shepherding shows, less so being the showrunner. Yeah. Like, Person of Interest is still one of my top 5 all-time favorite shows. Like, it's. Have you watched it, Nick?
I haven't. No.
So it takes a bit to get into it, but and the story is he basically lied to CBS about what it was. They were like, it's not the sci-fi stuff's just backstory. It's Person of the Week, you know, Case of the Week show. Yeah, totally. And then boom, turns into this warring sci-fi's first future of humanity philosophy stuff.
Oh,
and it gets
very Fringe-like. Yeah, it takes off like Fringe does. Yeah,
and Amy Acker shows up and is awesome.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, and Sarah Sahi, she shows up in season 2 and kicks fucking all the ass.
Yeah,
and it's also kind of a Batman show, which is
because before it aired, it was marketed as like one of their new crime dramas, like a CSI.
Yeah, and he just like lied. He like straight up to get it renewed. It was like, nope, Case of the Week all the time.
Yeah, it was very crime modeled. That's how it was marketed. Yeah. So when people watched, they were like, wasn't really expecting that. Okay, all right.
Yeah,
so
it's a great
I
had no idea. It was WB that leased it to CBS, which is why it's on HBO, because it aired on CBS for all of its run, and it's one of my all-time favorite, like, modern day sci-fi kind of stories. It's fucking awesome. Always recommend it. And Jonathan Nolan, that was his like big kind of breakout role as a writer / showrunner, and then he parlayed that into Westworld, and I think Fallout is a great universe for his like sensibilities as a creator, because they've got that kind of like, you know, commentary on technology and humanity and, you know, like progress versus, you know, like stability and safety and all that stuff, and those themes translate through like all of his work so far. So I think it could be well done, but I still circle back to my pick would be Halo, but done right. Like, okay. And I was thinking about this again, also. And I was like, you know, again, in the wake of both Elysium, because I think they nailed the realistic version of the tech with the ring world stuff, but also Avatar. It doesn't have to be live action. Like, you don't need a guy in a suit. Just use CGI. And just, it's expensive. It's going to be expensive. But, you know, you can use real world characters. Like Sergeant Johnson should be a real person. Like somebody that has, you know, that kind of charisma, because that's the, you know, the human character you want to, who's going to be the, you know, emotional, like kind of fun hook through everything, because the guy's awesome. I fucking love that character.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And he's nowhere to be found in the new in the new show. Like, they essentially decided to reinvent the wheel, which is like, why? Why'd you do that? That's stupid. Don't do that. And clearly The Last of Us is not doing that. They're not reinventing the wheel. They're more just tweaking the wheel, which is great. That's what you should do for adaptation. Kind of like in movie form, like Lord of the Rings. They didn't reinvent the wheel. Mm-hmm. It's outside of a few storytelling points about like things got moved up or pushed back or cut altogether. It's just a tweaked streamlined, kick-ass version of what they're adapting from. And I still think Halo is ripe for that. But usually you mentioned Mass Effect. I was also thinking a Spectre story that's not Shepard, like well before the Reaper War. Maybe that would be cool. Captain Anderson. Maybe it's his first interactions with Saren, and we're getting introduced to, right after First Contact War with the Turians, and then humanity entering the galactic space, and that's season 1. And then maybe they do the Reaper War down the line with Shepard.
Yeah.
Who knows? All I know is I don't trust them to do Garrus justice. Sorry.
Oh man, that's going to break a lot of hearts.
Garrus and Rex, you have to nail that. There's the character BioWare's game. You could do any BioWare game really. Their characters are so good. I almost worry about them adapting them. Dragon Age, Iron Bull, and because the narrative choices are so varied, there's no canon way to do it, right? How do you pull that off? That's what worries me about adapting the main story. But the universes that they've built are really, really cool. Mass Effect is an endlessly cool universe.
I just thought of a good casting if we do this. For Morden Solus, Jim Parsons from Big Bang Theory.
Could see it, but if you're going to play him as an older guy, I was going to go Jeffrey Combs.
Okay.
Who, if I'm a big Star Trek head, he's been in every Star Trek series.
Yeah.
And he was the Question on Justice League, the animated show.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, he was.
Yeah. And I didn't even realize he was in Transformers Prime either. I think he plays Ratchet. But, yeah, that voice would work. But also, you could just use the voice from the games, too.
Yeah, because he could be primarily CGI. A lot of these characters would be.
And I'm curious, what games have to be live? What need to be a mix? What are all CGI? What are more, do they go 2D animation? Halo's had something, it was close to, and you would say maybe an anime style. So I'm there's different things you can do with a lot of these different universes.
I'm less worried about Amazon and handling both Fallout and Mass Effect just because Invincible was incredible the first season.
Boys season 2.
I know, man. We know it's done. We know it's going to be released, but they haven't given us anything about season 2 of Invincible, and I'm really mad about that.
The Fall Guys tie-in is that happening now?
We were headed towards that, so it makes sense to do that.
Which again, it shouldn't be that big a deal. But they're starting to do promotional tie-ins. Where's the trailer?
Yeah. So they did The Boys right. They did The Expanse right after they took it over from Sci-Fi. So I have confidence that Amazon knows how to do this. And so, but then again,
they gave Carnival Row a season 2.
If the Fallout show is really bad, then I'm gonna be oh, here we go. I don't want to ruin another major game property, but I'm giving Amazon the benefit of the doubt because they don't want to. They spin off Rings of Power. I've had my problems with the pacing and all that, but it was a beautiful show.
They did not skimp on the budget.
No, they went all out to make sure that this was a good experience for people. Like I said, it really wasn't my cup of tea. I know Chris Gamma's going to be really mad at me for saying that again because I keep saying it.
He doesn't like Thor Ragnarok, so he gets to sit down.
I know.
Okay?
I know. But yeah, it's just it was for me, it wasn't really a banger, but it wasn't an awful show. It was a beautiful show. Everything about they put the money and the effort into it. So I have confidence that we're going to get a good Fallout show, and I'm hoping that we eventually start seeing a future with the Mass Effect show. Halo, look, man. The studio got involved with that show. They obviously got involved because they were so
bizarre because
we need Pablo.
It was Paramount, right?
Paramount Plus. Yeah. Yes.
Strange New Worlds came out and it was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
So I don't know who at Paramount was on that and not Halo, but
obviously one of those executives didn't play the game, watched their grandson play the game, and said, "Okay, this is the character. Okay, well we need him to take his helmet off."
Also, he needs to fuck.
Yeah, we need a sex scene. We need a Master Chief sex scene. And
so bizarre.
Yeah, this is not working for me, guy. This is awkward.
And they
I'm
took
really
the helmet off. Motherfuckers, it's like telling a Dredd movie where he takes the helmet off.
He took the helmet off in the first fucking episode.
Yeah.
We knew where we were going to go when he took it off halfway through the first episode. We're yeah, this is not going to be a Halo show. It's not going to be a Halo story. But it could see a revival somewhere else, but I doubt it. I think Paramount's
that's more of it'll happen 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Because it'll be recycled. It's Paramount.
I am really geeked out for Fallout. I will say that, and I need more information from them. But I've got a shit ton of content to go through over the next year. So
and we've got a lot of stuff. Speaking of stuff, last question to send everybody out on.
Okay.
What is your most hyped piece of pop culture entertainment, whether that be movie, game, book, comic book, whatever, for 2023?
All right.
I go first because I got my answer.
Okay.
Go for it.
And this is something I'm hoping Nick will pop back on for, and possibly Christian too.
Okay.
Justice League, or not just Justified. Justice League was on the brain because I mentioned Jeffrey Combs. Justified, City Primeval.
Oh my God.
It'll be awesome.
I forgot about that one.
And did you know that his daughter is playing his in-universe daughter?
Yep.
No, what? Really?
Yep. She's 14, and his daughter from the show would be 14 at the same time. So he's like, hey, do you just want to audition? He didn't get her the job. He's like, do you want to audition? She did, got the role because she, of course, read across from her dad. And everyone's like, dude, she's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm
so excited.
I'm so ready for that show.
Or is it
It's a miniseries, so one off.
Okay. Okay, sweet.
Man, I'm very excited to have Raylan Givens back.
I love Raylan Givens. God, he's one of my favorite protagonists.
Might have to do a rewatch. And on top of that, my other from movie, it's Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Ooh.
I like that. Good call.
And Dennis,
Good
you're
call.
still here.
Very
I may
cool.
have a podcast series to talk with you about. Because if memory served, you haven't seen any of them. I'm like, we could do a ranking episode.
That's true.
Wouldn't have to do 7 podcasts. They'd be like 1 or 2. Like we do 1 through 3, 4 through 6, and then just one about Dead Reckoning Part 1. And you wouldn't have to pay anything. I'd stream them all because I own them all on digital. And then, we go through and watch, and then we rank all those movies because they're freaking awesome. And thank you, Chris, for the raid. What's up, everyone? We're doing our podcast right now, the WARPburg Infusion Entertainment Review.
His ears must have been burning when
his ears were burning. We were just explaining to everyone in chat how he does not like Thor Ragnarok, and you should all shame him for this.
Yes. That's a very good call, WARPburg. I like that. I like those 2 picks, man.
Yeah, those 2. I'm like,
those are good.
Let's go. I'm fucking in.
Nick, how about you, man? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm glad you reminded me of that because that is also one of the ones that I would go to. I secretly hold out hope that Winds of Winter will eventually be released this year. It's not going to happen.
Call.
But I'm in the middle of a read-through of those books. I just happened to I finished one and I was like, I don't want to go to the next book in the series. And I was like, just looking through my Kindle of what I had. And sure enough, I was like, oh, there's a Game of Thrones. And I was like, oh, a Storm of Swords. And then I was like, Clash of Kings. All those. I'm on I'm on Storm of Swords right now. So the third book, about 38% of the way through. And I'm like, God, there's so much stuff I missed the first time. And there's so much stuff that's much more interesting this time around. And especially after having watched the show in the back and the forth, it's like, oh, it's so good. So I'm hopeful that Winds of Winter comes out. But I'm really excited for Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Very excited for that. I've been waiting for what feels like ages to play it. I want to play it with my kid in the room. I was playing God of War Ragnarok the other day, and I did a finishing move on, I think, a Wolver, and he ripped his jaw in half, and I was like, I got to turn this off when the kid's around. You probably shouldn't see this. So I'm thinking with Legend of Zelda, it might be a little less brutal, and he can chill in the room while I play. So I'm super excited for that game.
I do want to shout out chat. Apparently, and I'm looking at it here. Yeah, we do have the perfect evolution of beard growth.
Yeah.
I got the full beard. It was well trimmed for my brother's wedding. Everyone else got the little shorter one. Mine's all the way grown out. Not as big as it usually is.
Well, look, I can't grow a big one because then I look like Santa, man. It's white as hell.
I'm starting to get it. It's coming in down here. You can't see it because of the shadow, but it's pretty white down there, especially towards the neckline.
Let's see here. For me, I'm really excited for Peacemaker Season 2, just because a year ago,
that came out of fucking nowhere.
Yeah, we were just both just taken by surprise. That was probably the one where I watched the intro sequence in every fucking episode because it's just such an awesome intro sequence. But
they should
really
disable
good
the
story.
skip intro button for that one.
I'm really curious on how they're going to do Season 2s because they have to top Season 1, right? I mean, they're going to have to do something. The other thing is I'm really excited for Dune Part 2.
It's a great call.
That first movie was incredible. WARPburg and I both were really excited when it was announced that Denis Villeneuve was going to do this film, and it took forever. Like what we're talking about 2.5 years till we saw this movie hit the theaters.
And it got
thankfully
delayed.
we don't. Yeah, and thankfully we didn't have to wait that long. But like the story is incredible. Stellan, is it which Skarsgård? You and I always forget which Skarsgård. Stellan Skarsgård as the Baron.
Harkonnen.
Yeah. Batista was incredible in this. Like, just the entire cast was incredible. The score and the cinematography just blew me away. So I'm really excited for part 2. I'm really curious how far we're going. Are we going to complete the story in 2, or we're going to get a third chapter of it? Because the original book is just, there's just so much meat after.
Or are they going to leave it on a cliffhanger and just fill in with your imagination on what you think happens?
That's possible too. That's possible too. That would drive the casual moviegoer insane. But like,
because that's kind of where he left Blade Runner 2049.
That's very true.
Other than obviously Gosling's character had a definitive end, but the rest of the universe continued on.
Yeah. So yeah, Dune Part 2 is what I'm like. Mission Impossible. Like there's so much. You and I said
we
this
mentioned
last
John
year.
Wick Chapter 4.
John Wick Chapter 4, Guardians 3, which is something that we're working on. Actually,
yeah, I may be taking an Austin trip for that movie.
Yeah, Nick, we're talking about renting
Depends
out
on when the surgery for this is.
A block of seats in the Draft House for Cinco de Mayo weekend and watching it as a group while Guardians 3, man. So if we do it, we'll let you know.
Spider-Verse 2 is this year.
Across the Spider-Verse, like there's just so much content coming out this year, and last year was an incredible year, and a lot of Oscar-worthy films like were in the running, like came out last year. This year is just it's a good balance of like action, adventure, and drama that's coming out, both like in terms of show production as well as film. So I'm really excited. I really am, because we're kicking off here. We got Last of Us that kicked off, but what do we have coming up next? I think we have Mandalorian very soon.
Mandalorian's the next big tentpole show.
Yeah.
That I know of, at least. Obviously, there's shows coming out every week.
Yep.
But that's the next big one for me. That and History of the World Part 2.
History of the World Part 2. I thought it was a joke.
4-part miniseries.
I did too.
I thought that trailer was a joke, man, until I saw like, oh, they're really gonna do it, man.
I thought they would just keep teasing it
old?
like Spaceballs 3: The Search for the Sequel. Like,
oh man, no, it's the search for more money.
Yeah, I still think they should do the search for the sequel and just act like 2 didn't happen. Like, obviously it didn't, but like in universe, just skip 2. Like that would be such a Spaceballs joke.
Well, it's like you probably don't know this, but this really horrible '80s movie Leonard Part 6 with Bill Cosby. I don't know if you guys ever heard of it, but like there were never any other parts of, but it just was called Leonard Part 6. And he's an action hero, and it was such a stupid movie because Bill Cosby is one of the worst like talents in Hollywood ever, as well as being a horrible person. But it's just an awful movie. It's an awful movie. But it was called Leonard Part 6, and people were wondering where are the other parts? Where are the other 5 episodes?
It's like that senior prank where you get the pigs and you label them 1, 2, 3, 5, and just don't have 4. They keep searching the entire school.
Oh man, but yeah, great stuff coming out this year. I could like list a bunch of them, but Dune's really big on my list. Peacemaker, I was blown away by the first season of how good it was, and so I'm really excited what James Gunn's going to do here, because this is his last actual director production until and then he's taking over the DC universe for Warner Brothers Discovery. So obviously probably after Peacemaker airs, they announce what's gonna be the first DC movie slate, and it's more than likely gonna be Superman, right? I mean,
if they don't start with Superman, and I think James Gunn clearly knows this, you got to get Superman right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then go from there.
Well, apparently,
because like the DC universe would not exist without Superman.
The rumor is he's been reading a lot of All-Star Superman and likes that story, and that would be.
I still think what's so funny about Truth, Justice, and the American Way would be the perfect way to kickstart Superman and refute the Snyderverse at the same time. But that's the whole point. That's just my diatribe. And I literally wrote a 3-page script for a video after Cavill got cast. And then as soon as I was ready to film it, Cavill's out. It's like, son of a bitch. That sucks. It's a great script too, because it's a good pitch. But it will never happen.
There's so much good content coming out this year, man.
There's a lot.
Oh, man.
The chat, let us know what you're hyped for in 2023, because I have one last little tidbit from the news that dropped right before we were going live. So let us know what you're most hyped for in 2023. Movie, game, show. Chris, obviously I'm thinking it's Spider-Verse 2, because I know that first one might be your movie of all time. So right before we went live, I saw this article that Netflix had their quarterly sales meeting today, or call. and they said they're going to start the program to kick people off from sharing passwords in March.
Okay.
So end of March, basically, they're going to start rolling out the software options for kicking off users from your username. Like, you will be able to delete users, because I don't think you can currently do that. And they're going to start, like, paring down the number of users. So, like, if you have more than 2, you have to pay for extra users. I think that's going to be the mechanism they do to, like, kind of force people to delete users, unless they want to pay for a higher bill. And they said specifically, and I quote, let me scroll back down. Changed browsers. This won't be a universally popular move. Like, yep, they know this is going to piss people off.
Yep.
So if you have a Netflix subscription and you share your password, like all my siblings use mine, they get in the boot. Sorry, guys. Yeah. I can barely pay for all the ones I use now, and I keep them because I have a podcast. So you guys pay for it yourself. You're all adults. So I just wanted to share that a little bit and get your guys' brief, like, momentary reaction to that. Because I was like, that is a big shakeup.
Look, man, year over year, they lost 60%, 65%, 64% of their market cap.
Oh, jeez.
And they're talking about they gained 7 million followers in Q1, which we're barely 2 weeks into it.
Yeah.
They're obviously grasping at straws here. This is like, they know that they're going to lose another big chunk of their market cap.
As the streamers start reverting to the network model, which they were the disruptor for.
Yep.
They're gonna, because they don't have the back catalog.
Nope.
You know, because they didn't buy studios.
They're not an original IP. We've talked about this, how Netflix was always eventually going to be the odd man out, because all these other studios have their streaming networks. They own IP. The licensing
and
stuff,
Amazon,
whatever.
They bought MGM, so they're good.
Yep.
They're golden.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Exactly.
So,
they have
everybody
Bond,
else
they have
except
Mission.
for Apple,
Yep.
and Apple has a money making machine. They don't have to care.
And you and I
Netflix
both know that Peacock and Paramount, they're going to merge with somebody, because their platforms are awful. At some point, they're going to take a swing at running with a major player to just absorb the catalog and take a lot of money in, just like Disney did with Fox. Netflix is in a lot of trouble, and they've been in a lot of trouble for the last 11 months, but I think it's going to be an ugly Q1 for them. It's going to be really, really bad, and they're going to, especially if they decide to announce that their major shows like Cobra Kai's next season, Stranger Things last season, all of those shows are going to be moved over to a weekly model and remove binge. The hit they're going to take from losing sharing here in Q1, and then when they make that announcement that they're going to go with the standard weekly model, it's going to be an even bigger hit, and they're going to suffer majorly. We could be looking at the end, and it would be kind of cool if Blockbuster ended up buying Netflix.
Just come back, like
go full circle.
I saw a Working Family video, like, that was renting like movies still in Boone, Iowa, where my brother got married. I was like, they still have a family video? That's crazy. Because Nick, this would have been before you and I ever interacted. But Fusion, do you remember that Madden series I did where I played through the Vikings year?
Yes, because I played a couple games.
I played with you. Jen, I want to say I had Aaron Porter on.
Yep.
And I was like, hey, everyone, I'll pay you to go rent the game. And then they brought it back to do that. And, like, that's impossible now. Yeah. Like, I would love to see something like akin to that kind of come back, because we were mentioning how physical media is somewhat having a resurgence, not all the way. Seriously, Disney, give me a Prey 4K right the fuck now. I want that movie on 4K so bad.
Yeah, man. That was such a good movie last year.
But that'll be an interesting component in terms of this decision with Netflix. Is going to be a very interesting one to watch as 2023 plays out. Because 2022 was wild with them on their stock price and all the decisions. And their co-founder just stepped down as CEO.
Yep.
Like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild 2023, both in the, my eyeballs are enjoying watching all this cool content, and then there's a fire going on behind you in terms of the industry. Plus, there's the VFX union stuff to talk about too. Which is
market cap still at 140 billion. If they get cut down to about 60 billion, I think that you're going to start seeing some companies make major plays at them. It's still a huge amount of money.
It's for everyone else. It's in this major space. That's a side project for them. It's not the one thing they do.
Yeah. They just, and the other thing is they have a horrible reputation now because they've canceled so many good shows.
Yeah,
like
they
Glow did the blockbuster show is the recent one. There's a couple of the recent ones that were really popular. Glow, they just canceled it and then refused to do a movie. Like there's just a history with Netflix that they really have screwed up their model, and whatever's happened to them, it's all because of Netflix. It's no outside factors. They didn't have any original content. They licensed IPs. They relied on The Office and Friends for so long.
They did.
This is the end of Netflix will be because of Netflix. It'll be an interesting story taught in business school right next to Elon Musk and what he's done to Tesla and Twitter. Like that's like how you could completely fuck up multi-billion-dollar companies within like a 12-month period. Like these will be legendary like case studies taught in school, and the Netflix one will be the major one taught in media schools.
Especially because it has the precursor with the whole blockbuster situation.
Yep.
Which is wild. Yep. That's such a fascinating time of like how that all came about. Because it realistically was not that long ago.
Nope.
Not at all.
Like even 10 years ago, Ames, Iowa, I went to that blockbuster every now and then. It's wild. Like Family Video had one in Buffalo Center, or not Buffalo, Mason City, an hour from me. And up until 2 years ago, now it's a pizza place. And
I will say, man, I miss Friday nights going to the video store. Those were kind of
great times.
Just looking to see what you could find, like weird shit. Did
it in college. That's how I watched Sanctuary, that old sci-fi Monster of the Week show.
That's how I got into anime as a kid, was the video store. Like I got into manga and stuff because, they had an international section at the Hollywood Video, and I dipped into that, and then I learned about manga, saw Akira, had my mind blown as a kid, and then went to the comic shop and learned about manga, and I missed how simple those days were. It's cool now that I can access anything and everything online, but still, it was kind of a cool way to kind of a fresh experience of discovery.
I think it was the scaled down model of it was more enticing because now you run into that phrase, the paradox of choice.
Yep.
The scrolling, just constantly scrolling through and never picking something new.
Yep.
Whereas like the more trimmed down options gave you a more concise look at what you might be interested in.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Which is one of the reasons I think something like an Apple TV, their approach is really interesting because they're not going shotgun. They're going, this is exactly, we're doing one thing in one genre, then we're going to do another genre, one thing. And I really appreciate their model for as hyper focused as it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think on that note, we should probably wrap it up because it's been one of our longer episodes so far. Other than I think the longest is still the 2-hour ranking the Dragon Age characters, which was...
Oh, I'll bet that took a while.
It took 2 hours and 2 minutes on the dot. And it was a great episode. But this one's been fantastic.
WARBurg won't tell you this, but before we started doing WAFER, we actually did a ranking of the MCU with Chris, and I think Joey was there.
And Aaron Porter was our call-in guest. The Living Tribunal that would judge.
It was the Living
choices.
Tribunal, and it was almost a 3.5-hour show we did.
Wow,
it was so long.
And that was when there was only 20 MCU movies.
Yeah, that was pre-Endgame.
Pre-Endgame, yep.
Yeah, it was in the run-up to Endgame. We did that, and it was a 4-part series. Shit. Oh, we did some dumb stuff back down on the old Bottom Shelf Nerds channel.
Still fun though, man. Still fun.
Heck yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and this has been a lot of fun, Nick. So thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah,
thanks for having me. I can talk Last of Us all day.
Heck yeah, and I may have to do a wrap up when everything's done. Okay. We don't do weekly. I know some podcasts I follow are going to do weekly breakdowns of Last of Us. We try to do bi-weekly, but it's been 3 weeks since our last one because New Year's and schedules and things got weird. But when season 1 wraps up, assuming I'm not laid up from surgery, I will definitely be hitting you up. Might see if we can get a couple other guests and have a little roundtable discussion on season 1 as a whole.
I'm excited.
Plus, it's right before March Madness too. Thank you, Fusion, for timelining that out for me in the Twitch chat.
Oh my god, what a wonderful time to be alive, guys!
I actually hope that week is the week I have surgery because then I can stay home and watch all of March Madness.
Oh,
that'd be a good time.
That's how the vasectomy places sell it. Get a vasectomy and watch March Madness.
Hey, you do what you got to do.
Just so you know. Anyway,
it's reversible.
Yeah, for a while.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's where we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone, for watching Twitch chat. Hello. If anybody's interested in this kind of thing, be sure to drop that follow. If you're on any podcast services, of course, subscribe, rate, review. Feed the algorithm beast as much as you can. I'd appreciate it. I know Fusion would too. And of course, if you're on the video version on YouTube, our Twitter handles are all on the screen, so you should follow everybody there. Any other closing thoughts, gentlemen?
I got nothing. I'm stoked for the rest of this season.
Yeah.
Yep. Also, Trenton says, thanks for coming on, Nick, and hope to see you stream again too. And that's ditto for me, because it's always a good time.
I'll get back to The Last of Us Part 1 on grounded difficulty soon. I think the show's going to get me back into it much faster.
Trenton, over under on how fast they go to play more Rocket League, though.
We can't be stopped. What
I
can
mean,
I
hey,
say?
sometimes the classics are the classics for a reason, you know? They're your go-tos.
I just can't get away. It always calls me back.
Just when you thought he was out, he got pulled back in.
They pulled back in.
They got me back.
Yeah.
All right.
It's like me and the Vikings fandom. Sometimes, I thought I was out, but then I'm back in. You can't quit it. Well, we should probably quit here.
Try.
So, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you in like a week or two.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.